2 descend the forgotten mine, William, haunted by memories that won't die, and Clara, searching for a father who never returned. But beneath the rock, something stirs, ancient, waiting, hungry. When the dead open their eyes, silence becomes the loudest scream. The letter arrived on a sunless afternoon, its paper damp with the humidity of the encroaching night. Inside, in trembling ink, were the last words of my estranged uncle, summoning me to the old family estate deep in the forgotten countryside. I had not seen him in years, and our correspondence had been sparse at best. Yet the urgency in his message was unmistakable, a plea veiled in cryptic prose, speaking of voices in the dark and a discovery that had shattered his fragile understanding of the world. His words, though few, exuded a dread that seeped into my bones. They whispered to me from the abyss, calling me by name. I fear what lies beneath our feet. I arrived at the estate under a leaden sky. Twilight draped the decaying manor in hues of ashen gray and deep purple. The once grand house, with its tall narrow windows and weathered stone walls, seemed to sag under the weight of secrets. As I pushed open the heavy oak door, the hinges cried out into the silence. A stale smell of neglect, of dust, mold, and something faintly coppery, wafted through the foyer. I hesitated on the threshold, struck by the oppressive atmosphere inside. It felt as though the house had been holding its breath, awaiting my return. Each step I took down the corridor was met with a soft echo, as if the darkness itself answered my intrusion. The halls were adorned with the relics of my uncle's life, faded portraits of stern ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow me, shelves crowded with bizarre artifacts he had collected from his travels, and stacks of leather-bound journals. The silence was heavy and unbroken, yet a subtle sense of being watched prickled the back of my neck. More than once, I thought I heard the floorboards creak in a distant room, as though someone, or something, shuffled away at my approach. In the study where my uncle spent his final days, I found chaos and clues. Books lay scattered on the rug, many of them open to pages filled with esoteric diagrams and passages in Latin and Portuguese. On the desk, a single journal lay open, its spine cracked, and its pages feathered with frantic scribbles. By the dying light filtering through the threadbare drapes, I deciphered fragments of his last entries. He wrote of whispers seeping up from the old well in the courtyard, of nightmares that plagued him whenever he dared to sleep, and of a towering shadow he glimpsed at the foot of his bed in the darkest hours of night. My uncle's words grew increasingly incoherent, blending scientific observation with mythic ramblings. He described an abyssal voice that promised revelation but at a terrible cost. One line stood out, etched in bold strokes that gouged the paper: "The earth has eyes that watch us, and beneath its skin something ancient stirs." A chill enveloped me as I realized that many of the journal's later pages had been torn out. Whatever final secret he had uncovered was missing, or deliberately removed. That night, a restless curiosity drove me to explore further. Armed with a flickering oil lamp found among my uncle's belongings, I ventured into the courtyard. The air was warm and still, yet I shivered as I approached the old stone well at its center. Tangled weeds and thorny vines clung to its crumbling rim. An odor of damp earth and decay emanated from the darkness below. I peered over the edge, lamp held high, but its feeble glow was swallowed by an inky blackness that seemed to breathe. In that moment, as I strained to see, a faint sound drifted up to meet me, a hushed chorus of whispers so soft I thought it the breeze. The voices were indistinct and distant, like echoes in a vast cavern, yet I felt them resonate within my mind. A sudden dizziness overcame me. It was as if the night itself were speaking, trying to lure me down into the fathomless pit. I stumbled back, heart pounding, unable to tear my gaze from that yawning maw in the earth. In the silent aftermath, I knew with dreadful certainty that my uncle's fears had not been mere delusions. Something was indeed calling from the depths. Sleep eluded me once I returned inside. I sat in the parlor, lamp at my side casting tall, jittery shadows on the peeling wallpaper. Every creak of the house set my nerves on edge. My thoughts churned with the journal's words and those impossible whispers. When exhaustion finally dragged me to a shallow, tormented slumber, I dreamed of an infinite abyss beneath the estate. I saw myself wandering through subterranean halls of cyclopean scale, their architecture impossible and defying all reason, walls at crooked angles and pillars carved with symbols older than mankind. In the dream, a voice guided me onward, echoing in ancient tongues, promising answers in the darkness ahead. I awoke just before dawn, trembling and drenched in cold sweat, the final echo of that otherworldly voice fading from my ears. Though it was only a dream, I felt its weight as though it had been real. The house remained utterly silent, but I sensed an expectation in the air, as if the very foundation yearned for me to act. Clutching my uncle's oil lamp and steeling my resolve, I decided I could no longer ignore the call from below. I would uncover whatever secret lay hidden in the earth, if only to put my uncle's tormented soul, and my own mounting fears, to rest. Morning arrived gray and wan. With the first weak light of dawn creeping through the low clouds, I steeled myself to descend into the cellar, toward the ancient well, and face whatever awaited in the darkness beneath. The cellar door groaned in protest as I pulled it open, releasing a gust of stale, cold air from below. I hesitated at the top of the stone stairs, lamp in one hand and a shovel in the other, unsure if I sought to arm myself against something lurking beneath or simply needed a tool to clear debris. Each step downward echoed unnaturally, as though I were descending into a vast cavern instead of a modest basement. At the base of the stairs, the floor was damp and dirt had seeped in through cracks in the foundation. The feeble lamplight revealed a low arched passage at the far wall, one that was not part of the original house plans. It looked to be older than the manor itself, carved directly into the bedrock and braced with beams blackened by age. Heart thundering in my chest, I squeezed through the narrow passage. The walls of hewn stone were slick with moisture and sloped at odd, unsettling angles, as if shaped by inhuman hands. The tunnel seemed to descend in a gentle spiral, leading me ever deeper underground. With each step, the air grew heavier and more humid, laden with the scent of wet stone and something acrid, like sulfur or old blood. My lamp sputtered, its flame struggling for oxygen in the thickening gloom. After what felt like an eternity, I emerged into a chamber of staggering dimensions, a hidden cavern far larger than the house above. I lifted the lamp high, its light feeble against the oppressive darkness, and could scarcely believe my eyes. Vast stone pillars, covered in eldritch carvings, loomed from the cavern floor and vanished into shadows above. The designs upon them were dizzying and non-Euclidean, twisting in geometric patterns that defied logic. At the center of the chamber yawned a gaping chasm, an abyssal pit identical to the well in the courtyard, as if the two were one and the same, a single throat descending into the bowels of the earth. My breath caught in my throat as I approached the edge of the subterranean pit. The whispers were louder here, rising from below in a cacophony of hushed voices. Some spoke in languages I recognized, Portuguese, Latin, begging or praying. Others spoke in no language I knew, uttering harsh syllables that made my skin crawl. It was as if centuries of desperate souls were trapped in that darkness, murmuring in eternal unrest. I remembered the pages torn from my uncle's journal and wondered if he had stood here before me, listening to this same infernal choir. On the far side of the chasm, something glimmered. I navigated carefully around the pit, my steps echoing into its depths. There, set into the rough stone wall, stood a colossal door or gate, partially ajar. It was crafted of a metal that did not gleam like gold or corrode like iron, but seemed alive with a dull, inner light. Strange sigils adorned its surface, the same symbols I had seen scrawled in my uncle's books. My heart pounded with a mix of dread and morbid curiosity. This door was not of any human make, it felt like a threshold to another world. Gathering every ounce of courage, I slipped through the narrow opening of the gate. Beyond lay a smaller chamber, circular in shape, its domed ceiling painted to resemble a night sky. Though faded with eons of neglect, I could discern constellations that no longer exist and swirling galaxies unknown to any earthly astronomer. In the center of the floor was a raised dais, and upon it an altar-like stone slab. Placed atop that slab was a book, enormous and bound in a dark, cracked leather or some hide of unknown origin. This had to be the source of my uncle's revelations, perhaps the very object that had led to his undoing. As I stepped closer, the temperature plummeted. My breath billowed in white puffs, and the edges of the book seemed rimed with frost despite the humid air. The whispering ceased the moment I touched the tome's cover, as if the unseen chorus were holding its breath. With trembling hands, I opened it. The pages were thick and yellowed, filled with spidery script and intricate drawings that hurt the mind to gaze upon. A fold-out map of stars and alien worlds unfurled, charts of a cosmos that defied everything I knew of the sky. On one page, an ink drawing depicted a great shadowy being rising from a pit, surrounded by supplicant figures. Its form was suggested with sparse strokes, a silhouette of writhing limbs and eyes like burning suns. Beneath it, a caption in Latin read, Illa obscuri dominus abyssii, the Dark Lord of the Abyss. My vision swam as I realized what my uncle had discovered, evidence of an ancient cult or civilization that had worshipped something inhuman and vast, a keeper of the abyss older than all myth. The journal's torn pages likely contained translations or incantations from this blasphemous text. And in that silent chamber, I felt that presence stir. It knew I was there. A low rumble reverberated through the ground, sending dust raining from the ceiling. The gate behind me slammed shut of its own accord, sealing me inside. The lamp flickered violently, and in its erratic light I saw movement in the darkness across the chamber. A shape was coalescing near the wall, a mass of shadow darker than night, unfolding and expanding. My mind recoiled at the sight. It was as though the ink from the pages had leaked into reality, birthing a three-dimensional silhouette that defied any sane description. The shape swelled, and I could make out hints of a monstrous form. It was a tangle of elongated limbs or tentacles, stretching and contracting. A suggestion of a towering head crowned with horns or jagged protuberances loomed above. In the midst of that living shadow, two pinpoints of light flared open like eyes, spilling forth a nauseating amber glow. Those eyes, if eyes they were, bore into me, and I felt an immediate and primal terror, the kind that reduces one's soul to cowering insignificance. It was as if I stood before the infinite void itself made flesh. The entity, this ancient horror, did not speak in words, but I felt its intent like a tidal wave crashing into my mind. The whispers resumed, now inside my skull, tearing at the fragile seams of my sanity. Images flooded my mind, visions of a boundless cosmic abyss, where stars were but flecks of cold fire swirling around in ever-hungering darkness. Echoes of eons reverberated within me, eons in which this being had slumbered beneath the earth, waiting for a gate to open, for a voice to answer its call. I realized with dawning horror that my uncle had been that voice, and now, unwittingly, so was I. I stumbled back, dropping the book. The thud of its cover closing broke the spell momentarily. The entity's advance halted, as if startled by the sudden sound. In that fleeting respite, instinct overtook me. Clutching the lamp, I swung it with all my strength at the altar, shattering the glass and spilling the flaming oil across the dais and the hidebound tome. Flames erupted, consuming the ancient pages in hungry orange light. A terrible shriek, not of this world, burst forth all around me, a howl of rage and agony that emanated from the very cavern walls and the depths below. It felt as if the abyss itself screamed. The chamber quaked. Chunks of stone fell as the ground heaved. In the chaos, the metal gate was wrenched open by unseen forces, and I did not hesitate. I fled, racing back through the colossal cavern, around the gaping pit, dodging falling debris. The pillars swayed as if made of wax, and fissures cracked the earth. All the while, that unearthly shriek rang in my ears, and the whispers rose to a fevered pitch, pleading, angry, despairing, an uproar of voices chasing me. By the time I reached the narrow tunnel and squeezed through, the cavern behind me was collapsing in earnest, filling the air with choking dust. I scrambled up the cellar stairs as the earth rumbled beneath my feet. With a final burst of effort, I threw myself through the cellar door and out into the pale morning light. Behind me, a deep, thunderous crash resounded from below, then silence. I lay on the grass of the overgrown yard, gasping and coughing, watching as the old well caved in on itself. A plume of dust and dirt geysered upward as the ground devoured the stones of its lining. When the trembling ceased, the well was no more, only a raw wound in the earth, quickly pooling with muddy water. I could hear nothing but the wind in the trees and my own heart pounding in my ears. The voices were gone. The whispers had finally fallen silent, at least for now. It has been several months since that harrowing descent into darkness, and I pen these words in the safety of daylight, though I fear I will never truly feel safe again. The authorities who arrived to investigate the strange earthquake that swallowed part of the estate found me delirious and half buried in dust. I babbled about voices and a monster in the earth until exhaustion silenced me. Mercifully, they attributed my outburst to trauma and the disorienting effects of being caught in a cave-in. The official report speaks of an unsound foundation, of a sinkhole that formed beneath the old manor. My uncle's death was explained away as an accident resulting from the instability of the ground. The remnants of the collapsed cavern were sealed, and the estate was abandoned to the elements. Outwardly, it is as if the events of those nights never occurred, just a tragic mishap at an old house. But I know the truth. Each night since my return to the city, I have been visited by the same torturous dreams. I find myself back in that subterranean temple, before the altar and the unspeakable presence lurking just beyond the light. I wake in terror, sometimes convinced I still hear a faint whisper fading into the corners of my bedroom. Often I cannot tell what frightens me more, the possibility that the creature was truly destroyed in the fire and collapse, or the dreadful notion that it survived, buried but unbowed, still waiting beneath the ruined estate for someone to heed its call again. My days are filled with a hollow pretense of normalcy. I wander through the motions of life, but my mind remains trapped in that abyss. Books on ancient folklore and forbidden cults lie open on my desk, as I try in vain to comprehend what I encountered. There are moments I question my sanity. Was it all the delirium of a fevered mind pushed to the brink by grief and isolation? The rational part of me desperately clings to that idea. Yet the scars on my arms from scrabbling through jagged tunnels, and the lingering scent of soot and sulfur that clings to my old field coat, tell me it was all horribly real. I have not returned to the estate, nor do I dare. Some nights, however, I catch myself gazing out my window toward the distant horizon, in the direction of that cursed land. In those moments, I feel an almost gravitational pull, as if the abyss, however sealed, exerts its influence still. Perhaps it is mere guilt, that I failed to save my uncle, that I meddled with forces beyond my control. Or perhaps it is something far more sinister, the last tendrils of an ancient consciousness brushing against my own, reminding me that, though I fled, I am forever tethered by the knowledge it let me glimpse. I write this account as a testimony and a warning, though I am uncertain who will ever read it. Certainly, few would believe it. But I cannot shake the feeling that my uncle intended for someone to know the truth, which is why he reached out to me in his final hours. Through my reluctant inheritance of his burden, I have come to understand the terrible weight he bore. There are doors that must never be opened, books that must never be read, and whispers that the human ear must never heed. As I finish these pages, dawn breaks outside my study window, bathing the world in gentle light. For a moment, I allow myself to believe that perhaps the nightmares will fade with time, that the horror I unleashed might remain entombed in the earth forever. Yet deep down I know that the cosmic horror I encountered is but one of countless others lurking at the edges of our reality. In quiet moments, when the veil of normalcy slips, I sense the vast indifferent universe waiting, with its ancient mysteries and monstrous truths. In the end, I am left with a fragile hope, not that I will ever forget what I saw, but that I will endure despite it. If there is any mercy in this world, let it be that the whispers remain silent. But should you ever find yourself in a lonely place and hear your name carried upon the breath of darkness, do not answer. Some calls, once answered, can never be undone.